Imagine stepping into a movie theater and halfway through the film, realizing no one else has moved. Not once, not even to blink. And when you try to leave, the doors are gone. There's something uniquely eerie about an empty theater. The silence, the hum of the projector, the feeling that you're being watched in the dark. This story isn't about a haunted house or a cursed object. It's about a building built to entertain that traps instead. This is the story of the theater with no exit. It started as a spontaneous date night. It was one of those hot, heavy July nights, the kind Ohio summers are known for. Humid, restless. My girlfriend, Olivia, and I had just left her grandma's house in a small town outside Columbus after a long visit. It was late, but neither of us was ready to go home. As we walked down the quiet street, we passed an old theater tucked between a pawn shop and a boarded-up bookstore. The marquee flickered, advertising a handful of films, one of them a late-night horror flick neither of us had heard of. We glanced at each other, shrugged. It was impulsive. We decided, why not? The place looked half abandoned, but the front doors were open. Inside, the lobby was dimly lit, the air thick with a smoky, musty smell. The place felt like it hadn't seen a full crowd in years. No line, just one guy at the concession counter who looked like he hadn't slept in days. His skin was pale, waxy, and his eyes didn't blink once as he rang us up. Olivia nudged me and whispered,
"Guess zombies work night shifts now."
We grabbed popcorn and sodas. When we walked toward the theater doors, no one was there to check our tickets. We chalked it up to it being late. Inside, the lights were dimmed. The previews had just ended. A few people sat scattered throughout the seats, but the silence was deafening. No talking, no rustling popcorn bags, no squeaky chairs, just the low hum of the projector. We sat near the middle, trying to get comfortable. But as I looked around, something felt off. It wasn't just the silence. The other moviegoers weren't moving. Not one of them. They sat frozen in their seats, like mannequins, staring blankly at the screen. No blinking, no chewing, no shifting in their seats. Just stillness. The theater wasn't small, maybe 100 seats or so, but it felt suffocating, claustrophobic. The air was thick, like we were being watched. I couldn't stop staring at the guy in the trench coat sitting ahead of us. Something about him made my skin crawl. Then the screen flickered. Just once. The whole place went dark for half a second. When it came back on, he was staring at us. Dead on. No expression. Just watching. I blinked, and he was looking forward again, like nothing had happened. I glanced at Olivia. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "We need to leave. Now." We quietly slid off the row and headed toward the exit. But just before we reached the door, I made the mistake of looking back. Every single person had turned to stare at us. All of them. Their faces blurred in the dim lighting, but their posture, perfectly still and perfectly wrong, sent a shiver down my spine. The room didn't feel big anymore. It felt like a coffin. We ran. We burst through the theater doors, expecting to be back in the lobby. But we weren't. It wasn't the same hallway we came in through. The wallpaper was different, older, like 1970s mustard yellow, peeling and stained. The air felt thick, hot. There was no sound, no music, no chatter, not even the hum of the lights. Just silence, broken only by our footsteps and the distant clicking of film reels. I grabbed Olivia's hand, whispering, "We'll just find another exit." She nodded, trying to stay calm. We walked slowly. Every step felt like it echoed for miles. Then, a door opened by itself, just a crack. And from that crack, I swear I saw an eye staring at us. Black sclera, unblinking. It darted away the second I noticed. We ran the opposite direction, desperate to get away. We tried the next door. Inside was another theater. Same setup. People sitting motionless, like mannequins. Their heads snapped to face us. We backed away slowly, letting the door slide shut. Olivia bumped into me. She turned around, noticing I was frozen in place, staring at something in horror. She followed my gaze. A thick cloud of black smoke was rolling toward us, swallowing everything into a dark void. Olivia's scream yanked me out of my shock. I grabbed her and pulled her down the corridor, frantically searching for a way out. That's when we saw it, a green exit sign glowing above a metallic door. We burst through it, the stairwell spiraling both up and down. We were on the ground floor, but the stairs led down, way down, into a darkness so deep we couldn't see the bottom. The walls below were raw concrete, unmarked by signs, unlit by lights. Just that incessant real sound, growing louder and more constant. Then we heard footsteps below us, not running, just pacing, measured, heavy. Olivia leaned over and looked down. Someone was staring up at us, leaning at an unnatural angle. She froze. She whispered, "They're not people." And I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. We turned and started heading up the stairs, hoping to find a way out. But every door we tried led somewhere different. An old arcade room, still flickering. A lobby filled with mannequins. A projection booth, with no windows, just a chair facing a blank screen and a reel playing nothing but static. I don't know how long we wandered. Time didn't feel real in there. Finally, we found the lobby again. Or something like it. The guy from earlier, the ticket guy, was standing behind the counter, unmoving. But now he was smiling, like he'd been waiting. We didn't speak. We just ran past him, smashed through the front doors. And this time, they opened. The second we stepped outside, the building behind us went completely dark. No lights, no marquee, no sign of the guy. It was like it had never been open at all. We stood there, shaking, staring at the place we had walked into just 20 minutes ago. The popcorn, the tickets, the drinks, gone. The only thing left was the icy chill of knowing we had stepped into something that shouldn't exist. I looked it up the next day. That theater had shut down 23 years ago, to the day after a fire during a late-night screening. Everyone inside had died due to smoke inhalation. They couldn't find their way out in the thick smoke. The strangest part, the movie playing that night. It was the same one we had picked to watch. Imagine exploring an old, abandoned cinema late at night. Kind of place that's been forgotten by everyone but the brave or the foolish. The air is thick with dust. The floors creak under your every step. But as you make your way deeper inside, you start to feel it. That nagging sensation. You're not alone. As the silence stretches on, you realize it's worse than you thought. Something or someone has been watching you, waiting. It was a Friday night, and like any normal teenage group, we were looking for trouble. Me, Ben, Sarah, Mark, and Jake. We were inseparable, always finding the next adventure. The old cinema complex had been abandoned for years, sitting quietly on the edge of Dallas, Texas. Rumors of flickering lights, strange sounds, and an eerie presence had swirled around it for as long as we could remember, but we were 16. Invincible. We slipped through the rusted fence, hearts pounding, not with fear, but excitement. The place looked like something out of a nightmare. Broken windows, graffiti-stained walls, and overgrown weeds. The kind of place no one would dare visit unless, like us, you were looking for something to prove, to challenge ourselves. The inside was pitch dark. The air was stale, damp, and musty. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs draped from the ceiling. It smelled like mold, and surprisingly, old popcorn. We moved cautiously, our flashlights slicing through the darkness, but there was nothing normal about this place. The flickering remnants of movie posters seemed frozen in time, some advertising films I didn't even recognize. Jake, of course, was up to his usual tricks, jumping out from behind doors, making us scream, then laughing his head off. It was funny at first, but then things started to feel off. The sounds we were hearing didn't seem like they came from Jake. Doors creaked on their own. Shadows flickered in the corners of our vision. Sarah said she felt like someone was standing in the darkness, watching, but when she shined her flashlight into the shadows, there was nothing there. At times, we'd freeze, and we could swear we heard footsteps, soft and deliberate, stopping the moment we did. It was unnerving. We all assumed it was Jake, up to his usual antics. Just another prank, right? The building was alive, but in a bad way. As we explored deeper into the complex, Mark pushed open a door to the projector room, and that's when we heard it, a scream. Not just any scream, but the terrified, guttural kind you never forget. It sounded like Jake. We rolled our eyes, figuring he was just playing a prank. But when we reached the room, Jake was nowhere to be found. We searched the area, growing more uneasy with every step. The building was a maze, dark hallways, storage rooms, and closets stacked with forgotten objects. Sarah was the first to spot something out of the ordinary. A small supply closet with the door slightly ajar. As we got closer, she saw a pair of eyes staring back at her through the crack. Unimpressed, she assumed it was Jake, hiding and waiting to jump out and scare her. But then, her eyes caught a bucket of stagnant water, now a murky green with age, and the foul smell hit her like a punch. With quick reflexes, she signaled to Mark to open the door while she grabbed the bucket of dirty water. This was her plan to get Jake back for scaring them so many times before. When the door flung open, Sarah threw the water without hesitation, but what she saw was far worse than she imagined. Standing there wasn't Jake. It was a man, a tall, disheveled man, dressed in an old, filthy hospital gown. His eyes were sunken, and his skin was pale, like he hadn't showered in weeks. He was staring at Sarah with a crazed look, mouth hanging open, drool dripping from one side of his mouth. At his feet, Jake lay unconscious, a dark red spot soaking his hair. That's when chaos erupted. Mark grabbed Sarah's hand, snapping her out of her state of shock and urging her to run. The man, consumed by a primal rage, bolted after them. Ben and I ran in the opposite direction, but when we realized he wasn't chasing us, we doubled back to get Jake. Ben stopped me. "Don't move him," he said. "If he hit his head, we could make it worse." Just then, we heard footsteps, fast and getting closer. I peered out the door just in time to see the crazed man sprinting back toward the room. Slamming the door shut behind us, Ben quickly shoved a mop and broom across it, barricading us inside. We were trapped. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the frantic thudding outside as he pounded on the door. Then, nothing. Just silence. For what felt like an eternity, we sat in the dead quiet of that dark room, barely breathing. We looked at each other, wondering if we should risk it, grab Jake and run. Minutes passed. Jake started to stir, his eyes snapping open. But before I could ask if he was okay, he froze. His gaze was fixed above us. "Slowly," he whispered, "Ben, look behind you." I slowly turned, my blood running cold. Through the vent above the door, the man's eyes stared down at us. His low growls echoed through the walls. He had crawled through the vents like an animal. We heard him slam his fists against the grate, grunting and growling as he did so. I grabbed Jake's arm. Pulling him to his feet, we bolted from the closet. The moment we burst through the door, the grate fell to the floor with a deafening clang. We ran, not daring to look back. We didn't stop running until we burst out into the parking lot. There, we found Sarah talking frantically to a security guard. When the guard saw us, his face went pale. The next thing we knew, we were in his car, speeding toward the fence. Behind us, we could hear the man screaming, rage in his voice as he banged against the chain link. The security guard helped us escape, but the fear lingered long after we were out of the complex. The police arrived shortly after, but by then, the man was gone. They eventually caught him inside one of the vents. It turned out he had escaped from a nearby mental facility. He'd been living in the abandoned cinema complex, unnoticed for weeks. But the story doesn't end there. At school, the following Monday, we were still processing the terror we'd experienced, complaining about being grounded and how unfair everything felt. But then, Sarah noticed something was off. Jake, who had always been the loudest and most confident of us, was eerily quiet. His eyes were distant, and his fingers fidgeted nervously with a pen, tapping on the desk over and over. So, what did your parents give you? Still grounded? Sarah asked, trying to break the silence. Jake snapped out of it, his eyes blank for a moment before he shook his head, avoiding her gaze. I'm fine, he muttered, his voice barely audible. Come on, man. What's the matter? Ben said, giving Jake a playful nudge. But even that didn't seem to pull Jake from his trance. Jake didn't respond immediately. After a long pause, without looking up, he finally spoke. Did any of you see anyone else when you walked into that room? The one with the cleaning supplies? We all exchanged confused glances. No. Why? We asked in unison. Though the question already felt wrong, he hesitated, looking away from us, his voice dropping to a whisper. I was trying to find a place to hide. You know, to scare you guys. But when I stepped into that room, it was so dark. Too dark. I felt it, like someone was standing in the corner, just watching me. He paused, his face turning pale as his hands began to shake. I called out, "Hello," but before I could react, something came at me. Fast, so fast. It looked like a woman, but her face was all wrong. Her head, it was glitching. Left, right, over and over. Too fast. I screamed and ran into the supply closet, slamming the door and holding the handle, trying to keep whatever was out there from getting in. His voice cracked. His hands shook harder. Sarah's eyes widened, disbelief written across her face. Wait, you didn't scream because of him? She asked, her voice wavering. Jake shook his head slowly, as if processing something that still haunted him. No, I didn't even see him at first. I didn't know he was there, until I realized someone was behind me. And then, everything went black. We were silent for what felt like an eternity, processing the terror in Jake's words. We had expected Jake to pull off his usual gotcha. His pranks were notorious. But there was no joke here. There was no trick. Jake was visibly rattled. His skin was pale, his eyes sunken. He no longer seemed like the same person we'd known. It was as if something in him had broken. We all felt the weight of it, the fear in the air. We had each experienced something that night, something we couldn't explain. But for Jake, it was different. Whatever that thing was, it left a permanent mark on him, a shadow that would never leave. He couldn't even find the strength to talk about it anymore. He was no longer the same guy, the same prankster. Did you know over 60% of people say they feel uneasy watching horror movies alone at night? That silence, the flickering light, ever feel like something's watching you from the dark? Well, I used to love that feeling until one night in that theater changed everything. There's something special about catching a horror flick alone in a nearly empty movie theater at a midnight showing. The darkness, the isolation, the way the sound wraps around you and makes the horror feel personal. For years, I'd go to late-night screenings just to soak in that creepy atmosphere. But what happened to me last summer made sure I'll never go back. It was a Friday night. On my way home from work, I decided to catch a movie. I picked a random horror film, nothing special, just a way to unwind. The theater was almost empty. Just 4 or 5 people scattered across the seats. I grabbed my usual spot, center row, middle seat. Perfect view. The movie started like any other. Popcorn in hand, lights dimmed, audio kicking in. But halfway through, I noticed something strange. A man sat alone in the front row, too close to the screen, neck tilted way back. Not moving, not fidgeting, not even breathing, as far as I could tell. Something about him just felt wrong. At first, I thought maybe he'd fallen asleep. But he didn't budge, not even as jump scares hit. The screen flickered just once. But in that flicker, I swear, everyone vanished. The whole theater looked empty. When the glitch passed, everyone was back. But now, I couldn't stop watching him. And the more I looked, the more I realized I couldn't see his face. I pulled out my phone to snap a pic. I aimed the camera, and he was gone. Not in real life. He was still sitting there, but through the phone, nothing, just an empty seat. That's when the fear really set in. My hands trembled. My mouth went dry. Then the screen glitched again, and this time the sound cut out. When it came back, he was gone. I stood up, ready to bolt. Looked around the theater. No one seemed to notice. I grabbed my bag and rushed into the hallway. But something made me turn around. And there he was, standing by the doors, half in the shadows, mouth wide open, like it had been broken or unhinged. And slowly, he turned his head toward me. I didn't wait. I ran, straight to my car, drove home like my life depended on it. And maybe it did. That night haunts me. I still don't know what I saw. But the theater closed down a month later. Out of curiosity, I looked it up. And that's when I found it. Years ago, a man had a fatal heart attack in that same front row. They found him with his head tilted back, mouth open, as if frozen in the middle of a scream. Have you ever had something unexplainable happen during a movie? We'd love to hear your creepy stories. Share them in the comments below. And if you want more spine-chilling exploration tales, hit that subscribe button and check out our other horror videos. Who knows what we'll find next time?